Hey everyone, welcome back to HD Reddit Reads. Today's topic is, what's your creepiest glitch in the Matrix or unexplainable thing that's ever happened to you? Let's get into it. When I was a teenager, my family lived in a big 115-year-old brick house. Plenty of creepy stuff happened out there, but one night, I was heading to bed when the door between the first floor kitchen and basement stairs absolutely slammed shut. It had a unique sound that I recognized immediately as the kitchen/basement door. There was no windows open that could have caused a draft. Our dog was asleep on the second floor. I was on the second floor. My parents were both asleep on the third floor attic. None of us could have shut the door. Effing terrified. I worked up the courage to go investigate, carrying my hilariously teeny pocket knife for protection. As I went downstairs, I turned on every light. When I reached the kitchen, the door was wide open. Even more freaked out, I had ran up to bed, leaving the lights on. A minute or two later, I heard a definite "shh, okay," from downstairs. I laid in bed and was ready to accept my demise. Eventually, I somehow fell asleep, and in the morning, I was there first downstairs. I woke up before my parents and dog, and found that the lights were all off, and the basement door had been shut again. I remember being pretty young, like 9 or 10, and I was in the car park of a pub in England. I remember seeing someone in their teens in the window of a house looking over the car park. They waved at me, and I felt like I knew them somehow. My parents asked who I was waving at, and I said some lady in the window over there. Didn't think much of it. Fast forward 10 years, I was at my nan's new house. I remember walking into her room, which I was never allowed to do, going to the window, and then I realized I was in the house looking over the same parking lot and remembered that interaction years before. Then, a girl around 9 or 10 who was in said car park waved at me, and I waved back. I felt like I knew her. Could not explain it, and I've never told anyone about it. It freaked me out. Weird but happy. About 5 years ago in November, we lost our family dog to cancer. She was the dog that my children grew up with, loved by all. At the next Christmas, at the end of the day of gifts, food, and family, as I was packing up, I found my tiny pewter dog figurine sitting on the mantle. I asked everyone who had been at the house that day if they left it. No one had. Okay, weird, but took it as a good omen. When my eldest went back to college at the end of the Christmas break, he said if he could take the little figurine to remember his dog. Of course I had said yes. A week or two later, picking up around the house, there was the figurine again. I called my son and said, "You forgot the dog figurine." He said, "No, I didn't. It's right in front of me on my desk." I had now found a second figurine. Again, no one claimed any knowledge of it. No idea how, but I still have the two of them tucked away on a shelf to this day. This happened around 1991. It's the middle of the night. I'm standing in my sister's living room, and it must be a full moon, because even though it's around 1 a.m. and the lights are off, I can clearly see. There's a mixing bowl with popcorn kernels in the bottom on the floor in front of the TV, and some rental VHS tapes in a pile nearby. I hear a noise and turn around to see my sister, normally very friendly Labrador retriever, looking like Cujo. Fangs bared, snarling, hackles raised. Suddenly, there's a bright flash of light and I wake up like I hit the bed from a great height. I think, that was a weird dream. Eventually, I fall back to sleep, and in the morning, I call my sister, planning to tell her the story, but she preempts me by telling me about the weird thing that happened to her in the night. They woke up to the sound of the dog snarling at about 1 a.m. Her husband thought there was a prowler in the house, got a gun, and went to find the dog. She was standing in the living room snarling at the middle of the room. He couldn't see anyone, so he flipped on the light. No one was there, and the dog instantly stopped snarling and walked to the bed like nothing had happened. He checked the property and went back to bed. We talked a bit, and I found out they had some rental movies, and of course we had popcorn. Why? My sister's a little woo-woo at times, so I decided not to tell her about my night. She lived about 450 miles away, by the way. I was on vacation in Florida visiting a friend. We were walking on the beach on a perfectly sunny day when everything went black for a second. I think it was weird, but explained it away thinking that my eyes were playing tricks on me, until he looked at me and said, "Did everything just go black for a second?" I wouldn't say this was creepy, but it was definitely one of the most quaintly surreal things I've ever experienced. So back in 2016, I was injured at work, and for about 6 months, my life consisted of going to physical therapy and being confined to bed until I could walk again. With that in mind, I had a lot of time to read books. One of the books that I was reading was Ex-Heroes by Peter Clines. Now, I don't know about anyone else, but when I read a book, I like to cast the characters in my head, coming up with how they look. One of the minor characters in the book was named Elia, and of course I know of someone named Elia. And because the book is set in Los Angeles, where I live, the Elia in the book became the Elia that I knew in my imagination. But then, something strange started to happen. The Elia in the book made specific references to movies like Aliens, a movie which the Elia I know is a huge fan of. The Elia in the book was a big fan of firearms, as the Elia that I know is. Put into words, these details seem slim, but there's something so strange about the character in the book that I eventually reached out to the Elia that I knew to ask about it. Turns out that Elia knows the author, Peter Clines, who had put him in the book. What are the odds that I would choose to buy a random book with a story that takes place essentially on my street in Los Angeles and features someone I know in real life as a minor character? That blew my mind, and it is easily one of the most surreal experiences I've had. Might get buried, but oh well. When I was playing baseball as a kid, they were handing out trophies at the end of the season. They called out the names of the kids while we received our trophies. There happened to be a kid with the same name as me. We met after the ceremony because it was weird since our last name isn't a very common one. We had the same birthday and everything. We looked alike. Both our dads were named Derek, and both of our sisters were named Lily. As a kid, I found it cool. As an adult, I find it cool and also disturbing. One day, when I was about 8, I didn't go to school because I was sick. My friend was supposed to bring me homework, etc., but he never came. My granddad came home from work and he told me that friend was dead. I was devastated. That night, I had a dream. I was with my friend at the playground next to our school and we were talking. Then he told me that he is safe and it didn't hurt when that car hit him. The next day, my mother wanted to talk to me about the situation, and she asked me if I wanted to know what happened. I told her that I know everything because my friend told me. She thought that my granddad told me, but he did not. He said he did not want to tell me without her knowing. That night, I had a dream again, and I was talking to him again. We were playing and having fun, and he told me that he really had to go and that we won't see each other ever again. The next day was his funeral, and I really haven't had a dream about him ever since. This summer, I bought my girlfriend a last-minute birthday trip to kayaking around the San Juan Islands off the Washington state coast. After a long drive and a ferry trip, we found the tour group of about 20 people, and then we were shuffled into a shuttle van for a ride to the beach. Now, my girlfriend has a unique name similar to the name of a famous painter. Let's say it's Rebecca Warhol, just for fun. It's not. She's a little ray of sunshine and started chatting with the middle-aged woman sitting next to her on the shuttle as we waited to leave. The woman noted that she had always loved the name Rebecca as it was her mother's name. They made pleasant small talk in the van until our tour guide passed around the sign-in sheet for all of us to fill out. That's when things got strange. My girlfriend wrote her full name on the sheet and passed it to the woman, who immediately shouted, "Oh my God," and started crying. After a few minutes of total confusion, she told us Rebecca Warhol was her mother's full name, and these islands were her favorite place in the world. She passed away this summer from cancer, and we've traveled hundreds of miles to spread her ashes here. We were stunned. I literally picked a random date, time, and tour company, and then we were split into the same group as this woman, and my girlfriend was sitting right next to her on the shuttle. What the hell? She continued by saying, "My daughter told us that Nana Rebecca would be with us on this trip, and I didn't believe it until now. It was the most unbelievable coincidence we had ever experienced, and it's totally convinced me that there's more to this world than we think." As my brother later said, the universe winked at us that day. I shared this a few years ago when this question was asked last time, and I didn't realize how glitchy in the Matrix it was until people started commenting. In college, I took a hard news/soft news journalism class where one of the assignments was to write an obituary for one of my grandparents. The professor told us to write it on a deceased grandparent, but if all your grandparents were still alive, we had to choose one. In my case, all of my grandparents were alive. I procrastinated actually doing the assignment until the night before it was due because it seemed like a morbid assignment, especially since all my grandparents were still alive. Scrambling for an easy grandparent to write about, I gave my mom a call and asked her for some basic biographical information about my maternal grandfather. As we were talking about my grandpa's career, my mom couldn't recall the name of the companies he worked at. She lectured me about waiting until the last minute to write the assignment because it was late, 10:30 p.m., my grandpa's time. However, she said she would give him a call to see if he was still awake, and be able to answer the question once my assignment was due the following morning. When my mom called my grandma answered the phone in a panic. My grandma frantically explained that the paramedics had just arrived and were performing CPR on my grandpa because he had stopped breathing and lost consciousness. My mom was able to stay on the phone with my grandma until they took my grandpa to the hospital, where he was declared dead. In the time my mom had been talking on the phone about my grandpa's obituary, he was dying. His death was entirely unexpected at that, although he was in his 80s. He was the healthiest of my grandparents at the time. We ended up using the obituary I wrote for that writing assignment as an actual obituary. Still freaks me out when I think about the timing. Thank you for listening, everyone. If you enjoyed the content, please consider subscribing. It'll be greatly appreciated. And if you want to visit the original thread, I'll link it in the description. But yeah, that's it. I'll see you guys in the next one.